Hey friends and neighbors, Dan Cavallari, slow guy on the fast ride, and today I'm in the garage, which is full of chemical smells because I've been doing woodworking projects. So of course I invited a guest over.
I am high as a kite.
Just huffing some fumes here. Today I am joined in the garage by Andrew Bernstein. We all know you as Bernie here in the bike world. Bernie, you had quite an experience in the last couple of years since last you and I rode together.
That's true.
The brief rundown is that you were hit by a car. And
I was hit by a driver.
A driver. Yes. Please keep correcting me on that, because I, like everybody else, I need to be better about that. But
Yep.
You were hit by a driver, and that nearly ended your life. And but more recently, what happened was the court case, and I want to talk about that because you made a very powerful statement in court, which is what made me pick up the phone to call you about this. But first, give us a brief rundown. What happened? How did you end up in this situation?
Yeah, so July 20, 2019, I was training for a track race called the Fixture Classic, which happened in Minneapolis when they still had a track.
Yeah.
So I had ridden from Boulder, where I live, out to the velodrome in Erie, which is, it's about a 45-minute ride.
Right.
Did my workout, did part of my workout. Actually, it started raining, so I got cut off.
Right.
And then switched back to my road bike and started riding home. And on the way home, someone drove into me with a cargo van and hit me with enough force that I was like thrown off the road into a ditch.
Right.
The bike cracked in half, and they left. They hit and run, and I had 35 broken bones. I had like this incredible internal bleeding into my pelvis, 2 collapsed lungs, and a spinal cord injury.
Jeez.
And concussion, and just a number of other sort of traumatic type blunt force injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like semi-conscious. Like I have very dim, dull memory from coming to on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the impact. And I remember thinking like, I'm fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, I need help.
Right.
This is beyond my ability to help myself.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to call 911. And then I remember not being able to find my phone, and thinking, okay, well, if I can't find my phone, like next best thing, like I better try and wave at a car.
Yeah.
And I don't remember actually successfully waving down a car. But I did, because a driver, after about half an hour, 40 minutes,
Jeez.
After a long time, someone spotted me.
Yeah.
And the guy's name is Tim. He recounted seeing me sit up and lay myself back down. And, his supposition, it makes sense to me, is like I was listening, and when I heard a car, I would try and raise myself up.
Yeah.
And he wasn't sure what he'd seen, but he circled around, and on the second pass he didn't see anything, and he's like, I'm just gonna make certain.
Yeah.
Circled a third time, and on the third time he didn't see me again, but he spotted a helmet, so he slowed down.
Yeah.
And he spotted my bike.
Jeez.
And then he stopped and got out of his car and found me in the grass. And called 911, and ambulance came and scooped me up and drove me to Boulder Community Health. And it was touch and go. It was touch and go for several days. Maybe as long as 4 or 5 days. I had lost a huge amount of blood to this internal bleeding, and so I was just getting transfusions, and I had these 2 collapsed lungs that had to be reinflated, and then I had all these broken bones. So I ended up, kind of after the initial, trauma response at Boulder Community Health, I ended up getting airlifted to Denver Health.
Right.
And I was there for a month, where they surgery to repair my my shoulder and my pelvis, which had been crushed, and my femur, tib, fib, ankle, and then spinal fusion.
Jeez.
And then surgery to first they packed my pelvis to stop the bleeding, then they unpacked my pelvis to remove the gauze that's packed in there. Yeah, super gruesome. Yeah. And because I had the collapsed lungs, I had been intubated.
Yeah.
So then, eventually I got a tracheostomy. So I was like breathing through this scar on my neck. And yeah, and then, at some point I was in a coma for about 10 days, eventually came out of it. And was there for a while after that, kind of just starting to recover, getting medically stable. Eventually transferred to a long-term care hospital, where I stayed for a month, just recuperating, like letting bones heal, letting my concussion symptoms kind of subside. Because that was
the minor stuff.
Minor stuff. Yeah, it's fun. It's like any one of these injuries would be a major devastating injury to most people.
Yeah.
And I just had so many of them that it's like, oh, concussion, like whatever. And then after a month there, I got transferred to a third hospital called Craig Hospital, which is a hospital in Denver that specializes in spinal cord injury rehabilitation. And I was there for a month. And that was kind of where they started to like educate me on what spinal cord injury means and like what my prognosis was and what I could look forward to in the future. And then, so, that the crash happened end of July, and mid-October I went home. And, at that time I was reliant on a wheelchair. I was ambulating, at that time I had a brace that went all the way up to the top of my thigh, and it locked my knee. So I was able to like basically have this peg leg. And that's how I got around. I had 2 crutches and, walked super, super slowly. And then, you're off in the world, and then you're kind of, after that point, you're used to having like round the clock medical care. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, dude, like figure it out. And, so then I began this like long process of rehabilitating myself and figuring out like what physical therapy do I need, what ancillary therapies do I need, what kind of like new fun medical appointments do I need to be making for myself on a constant basis. And so it's been 2 years since I got out of the hospital. And I've been fortunate to be making a lot of progress. I'm grateful to be able to, come down here and hang out in the garage and chat with you.
Absolutely. And get high off of polyurethane fumes.
Exactly. Yeah.
As you can tell, this is going to be a very chipper episode of In the Garage. But, what struck me, and this is the second episode of In the Garage that I've done with somebody who was hit by a car in Boulder. Adelaide Per was here. You can watch that episode on my YouTube channel. And Adelaide wrote a book about her experience and the post-traumatic stress that came with it, and the mental aspect of it. And I assume that you have also gone through a lot of mental analysis, really, to understand what your life is going to be like now, and some of the things you're going to need to change from here on. And it struck me just now that, you said that, okay, go out into the world after all this medical, that's kind of like what it was like having a child. Was like, they're like, well, we took this thing out of your wife and now it's yours and take it home. And that was just such a massive mental change for me as a parent. But what I wanted to talk about was very recently, within the last couple of weeks, the court case wrapped up. And you gave a very, very powerful impact statement that I'll make sure that you all can read, and I'll link to it down below. Tell me about, after all this time of this transition period in your life, this very difficult physical transformation that I assume came with a lot of mental transformation. Tell me what it was like to have to sit down and analyze what you were going to say in that courtroom to the person who hit you and left you there.
Well, as with most things in my life, Daniel, I procrastinated on writing my victim impact statement.
A true writer.
4 months. You could even say years. And then I, flew to New York to see my dad and to hang out with my girlfriend's family. And on the plane home on a Sunday, I was like, okay, I have to go to court on Friday. I should really do this.
Really the last minute. Nicely done.
So I wrote my statement on the Southwest, home from, on the Delta, home from New York. And I think it was, I think I knew what to say, knew what I wanted to say. And, I just, as I said, it was a hit and run. So it was a lengthy investigation, where the police, first found the vehicle, thanks to surveillance video, and surveillance video, but also actually really thanks to a tip that the vehicle that was being sought had been spotted in Lafayette.
Lafayette is near Boulder, for those of you.
Yes, close by community. And then after that, it was like a year or more before they were ready to say conclusively, like, okay, we know who the driver was.
Right.
And then from that point, it was, another 7 months or longer for them to finally make an arrest, because the person,
7 months.
I'll double check that, but it was a long time.
Wow.
More than 6 months, fewer than 9 months.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
That's a close enough range, I would say.
Yeah. It was a long time.
Yeah.
And the reason being that, of course, like, this guy is sort of effectively homeless. Like, stayed with friends, sometimes stayed with his ex-wife.
Yeah.
But they couldn't find him.
Sure.
And the only reason he got arrested at all was because he got, go figure, pulled over for a traffic violation.
Oh, jeez.
And so, he was arrested and then, released on a laughable amount of bail. And from the time he got arrested, which was, I think it was in July, so the sentencing went pretty fast, finally.
Yeah.
And the way the case against him went, the DA, the Boulder County District Attorney, decided to offer him a plea bargain. So he, in exchange for pleading guilty, he received what we call a stipulated sentence. So I didn't go into that hearing 2 weeks ago wondering about the outcome. I knew, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that his sentence would be, 2 years plus parole, and so in that way, I was sort of prepared. I didn't have to, like, wonder, like, is he going to get community service? Is he going away for life? Like, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
And, I think for me, a lot of the process of deciding what to say to the court that day was just thinking about what does this mean for me? And the sad reality is that this doesn't mean much for me.
Yeah.
He will go to jail. He, again, 2-year sentence in Colorado, assuming good behavior, you serve about 30%. So he'll be free in 6 or 7 months.
Jeez.
That's April.
Right.
And, in next April, I'll still be paralyzed. I'll still be riding an e-bike.
Right.
I'll still be using catheters to pee.
Right. Does nothing for you. Yeah.
Right. So it does nothing for me. He had no insurance. He has no resources. So it's not like I can sue him for everything he's worth,
Right.
I mean, I could, but it's like, I don't stand to gain anything from it.
Sure.
So when I sat down to write that statement, I was just kind of thinking, like, I want the court to know and to recognize that this is not a just outcome.
Right.
And my approach to doing that was to describe my injuries, both the traumatic ones and the chronic ones.
Yeah.
And then to kind of say, like, listen, I understand what's happening here today. I agree with the sentence.
Sure.
But I don't feel that it is just.
Right.
And I think I communicated that point effectively. And the judge agreed with me for what it was worth. I think she echoed things that the DA had said to me, which is that, like, we don't have a better way of dealing with criminal drivers in this kind of situation. Like, we don't have an effective rehabilitation program, or any rehabilitation program.
Yeah.
And because this was a hit and run, we don't know if the driver was drunk or high or whatever, like, and we'll never know. And because we don't know, we can't punish him for that.
Right.
And that's shitty.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious though. I mean, and I don't know what this case was like on a day-to-day basis for you. I have a recollection of, like, we need to find this driver. And then there was a period of time where it was like, well, they found him, and there was radio silence for a long time, which, this is externally, of course. I'm sure there was no radio silence for you. I mean, you were dealing with this every day. But was there ever a discussion or a question of whether his license could be taken away?
I mean, that certainly was what I wanted.
Yeah.
Still what I want. Right. And I included that in my statement. Like, I think that's inappropriate punishment. This person never drives again.
Right.
And this person compensates me for if nothing else, the cost of all my medical care, which is astronomical, and is going to follow me for the rest of my life. But that's not on the menu, essentially, for, like, criminal prosecutions in this type of case.
Is that just a state law kind of thing? Like, there's no law on the books that...
There's no, like, basically what it is, he was charged with leaving the scene of an accident causing serious bodily injury, which is a Class 4 felony.
Okay.
He ended up being offered and pleading to a Class 5 version of that offense.
Okay.
And when you plead to a penalty or to a crime, there's basically a certain range of punishments that are available.
Yeah.
And lifelong license suspension is not one of those options.
Interesting.
So he is not allowed to drive for the length of his parole, or incarceration plus parole.
Right.
In my opinion, this is a person who has demonstrated wanton disregard for the law and is likely to continue driving.
Yeah.
When he can.
Right.
And by can, I mean when he has access to a vehicle.
Sure.
I don't think he cares.
Right. Well, that's clear by the fact that he got another moving infraction as they were looking for him. I mean,
exactly. And by the fact that he hit and ran in the first place.
Right.
Like responsible drivers don't do that.
Right.
Responsible drivers don't drive without insurance.
Right.
So that's what I wanted. That was not on the table. And that is really unfortunate. I think that's like a hole in our criminal laws in this country.
Yeah. Huge. Yeah, huge hole. I mean, and I guess now, when was the sentencing? Was that?
It was 2 weeks ago Friday.
2 weeks ago. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot of time to sort of process that experience, but I mean, Adelaide, like I said, wrote a book about her experience, and that was sort of her way of processing through this. What has been your method of dealing with this overwhelming experience and processing not only the experience itself, but sort of the unjust end of it? Well, the end for him, not so much for you, but
I think the week after was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Because although I knew the circumstance, I knew his deal, and I knew what my circumstance was likely to be following the trial, which again was the same as the week before. I don't think it really hit home for me that this is it. You have no more help coming.
Right.
And my medical bills are $20,000 a year for the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I have every expectation that will probably plateau for a while, and then when I get older and suddenly my body ages faster than it would if I didn't have the spinal cord injury,
mm-hmm.
they'll probably go the other way, go up.
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate to have a good job with health insurance, but that's a limited benefit
mm-hmm.
In this country. There's still these enormous out of pockets, and there's a lot of things that insurance just doesn't cover at all.
Mm-hmm.
Including things like, in some cases, wheelchairs, which I was one in one for a long time. I'm
mm-hmm.
very fortunate not to need one now, but I probably will again in the future. I certainly will. So I think the realization that okay, I have to manage
mm-hmm.
every other aspect of my life in a way that works towards creating a future where I can take care of myself. Is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I really love about you, Bernie, is that you're from New York. You've got a little bit of that New York salt in you.
Do I?
You don't mince words. And I think, in a way, your statement really it keeps with that theme in a way that I thought was really amazing to me, because one of the things you did in that statement was explain specifically a lot of your injuries and how they're lasting for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
You were not shy about explaining what works and what doesn't work anymore, that your life is literally going to be shortened as a result of this. Why was it important for you to say that?
I thought it was very important for the court to understand the total impact that this person's had on me.
Yeah.
I could have said less.
Yeah.
I could have said nothing.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have changed the outcome, as I said. But this case didn't go to trial, and I didn't get to haul in all my doctors to testify on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have had they would have come willingly, I'm sure.
Yeah. Right.
But I didn't get to I didn't have the opportunity to testify to all that I've lost as a result of this person's criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the best I could do in a brief statement, I wanted to kind of express it.
Yeah.
I wanted to put it on the record and say, like, this is the impact he's had on me so far, and here's what I can expect. And I really was speaking to the media and the people looking at the media like yourself as much as I was to the court.
Yeah.
I would say I wasn't really talking to the driver. He does not strike me as someone who's going to be introspective enough to appreciate or give a shit.
Right.
Evidenced by the fact that he said the words "I'm sorry" in court, but he didn't appear to mean it.
Yeah, sure.
And he didn't seem to even understand, even after my statement, what he had put me through.
Yeah, right.
So I have taken it upon myself to bring visibility to my story, because I know that this happens to someone like Adelaide. It happens to it happens to people every single day. People get hit and killed, and sometimes it really is an unintended act. Sometimes it is an act of violence. Both are dangerous. Both result in people dying.
Yeah.
And I think that will probably always be a part of life in America, unfortunately. But I see it as something that I can do to help someone else by bringing visibility to those issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully reaching drivers and saying, like, listen, like, I know you may not think it's a big deal to text somebody while you're driving, but here's what can happen. I know you may not think it's a big deal to pass a cyclist close, but here's what can happen.
Right. That to me is the most frightening part of it is, despite seeing your trauma firsthand and what you're going through still and what you're going to be going through for literally the rest of your life, to read the comments on Twitter or on, social media, or just even in the articles posted about your accident, and to bring up something like, well, I've seen cyclists blow through stops. How do we stop that? And I know you don't know the answer to that. I mean, it doesn't make you an expert on this because you were hit by a car, or by a driver, excuse me. But it just raises these messaging questions, right? Like, so much of what's happening now, now that the court case is over, is sort of, in a sense, sort of like a marketing campaign. Like, how do we market to people who don't want to hear that they are being a menace and to society by driving cars the way they do? How do you market that? How do you change those minds of people who saw that one cyclist run a red light that one time?
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's an answer for that. And I'm certainly not looking to you because, you're not the expert on it because you were hit.
Right.
But it's what sort of got me thinking about it after hearing your statement, watching this whole thing unfold. There are real consequences that don't go away just because the headlines stop,
Yeah. And I think that, like, my problem with bike advocacy is that a lot of it focuses on speaking to cyclists.
Yeah.
And cyclists spend a huge amount of time debating things on Twitter amongst themselves, like, should we be vehicular cyclists, or should we be using the shoulder? And I have very little interest in that type of advocacy. I don't think it's helpful. I think the only bike advocacy that I am interested in is speaking to drivers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I guess I'm being a little bit hypocritical by being on your podcast, but maybe people watching know people who are drivers who are not also cyclists.
Right.
But I also think it, bears reinforcing, most cyclists also drive cars. Yeah. I certainly do. I know you do.
Yeah.
And I think, none of us is beyond needing a reminder to say, like, you should do everything you can to be as safe as you can. And, probably all of us have people in our lives who could benefit from that kind of reminder.
Yeah, and I think that, to me, is one of the most valuable things about having you on today, and why I had Adelaide on was, in a sense, yes, we are talking to each other again, but I think the important thing to take away, right, is what you just said, which is that we can't just be this insular community anymore, and we can't just talk to each other about how right we are about cars. We know at this point that there is a problem. We know that this is a huge issue, and we know that in order to change this, we need to speak to drivers. Well, now it's time to start speaking to drivers, and how do we do that? That's the question that I have more interest in answering. How do we do that? I mean, there's bike advocacy groups. How are we reaching the people that don't care.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I don't think we're doing a great job of that.
No, and like I haven't yet found the time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I acknowledge that like I'm not practicing what I preach.
It's only been 2 weeks since the court case. So
Well,
here's the world. Put this on your shoulders.
No excuse. But like, I think that like the something that I'm interested in doing when I have time to think about it
Sure.
and think about how to do it is like, let's go table at car dealerships.
Yeah.
Let's go to Formula One races. Let's go to the fucking drag strip down in Morrison. Like,
yeah, right.
Like let's go places where cyclists aren't. And I think, you can probably have a lot of super unpleasant conversations at those places with people who don't want to hear it and
Right.
want to just like, go as fast as they can in their stupid sports car
Right.
down some road, and they are annoyed that cyclists are in the way. But, they like have to, they have to be confronted with it where they are,
Mm-hmm.
to even start the conversation.
Right.
And I do think that like automotive media has a role to play. Like, I think we need to start like,
yes.
start, I'm sorry, we need to stop lionizing things like the Cannonball Run. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you how much the coverage of the Cannonball Run pisses me off. Like, we're celebrating people who drive, in some cases, double the fucking speed limit
Yeah.
for no purpose.
Right.
Like, that's so dangerous.
Yes.
And that's not even something that really affects cyclists, right?
Right.
That's like just putting other motorists in danger.
Sure.
So I think like we would be a stronger country if we were all safer drivers,
Right.
and not just safer, but also more respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And even in like progressive liberal Boulder, we last year lowered speed limits from 25 to 20, and people had a shit fit.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only talking about like neighborhood streets.
Right,
We're not talking about like the arterials or the main roads. And we're like, this is going to make me late to work. Like,
Right.
Really? You drive your entire commute on neighborhood streets?
Right.
And it must not be very long. We can be like another 30 seconds late to work.
You could do that on a bicycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Since the conclusion of the court case, since that day you were hit, is there anything that you haven't been able to convey or say that you want to say now? I mean, is there anything about this story that hasn't been conveyed in a way that you wanted it to? Is there anything you want to say to people who are listening?
Well, I just think, the biggest thing that I would like to suggest to everybody watching is that we all have to take it upon ourselves to speak to the people in our lives who are not cyclists about their responsibility to be safe drivers.
Yeah.
And to, maybe help them understand the benefits to them of being a safe driver. As we've discussed, like the guy who hit me, he's going to prison for 2 years. And while that may not be a just sentence, he's definitely not happy about it.
Right.
You wouldn't be happy if you were going to jail. I wouldn't want to go to jail. And we should all be motivated to avoid that, right?
Yeah.
And more than that, we should all, as Americans and as neighbors and people who share this society, we should be motivated to look out for each other.
Right.
So I hope that that's a takeaway from hearing my stories. Like, we all have responsibilities to look out for each other on the road.
Yeah.
And in all aspects of life, but the road is a place of a particular kind of danger that we are all exposed to all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the most important thing that I can say to people coming out of this experience. Or well, I wouldn't say that I'm coming out of it, but coming into this new phase of my experience.
Yeah. So, generally speaking, just to summarize, say, have a hard conversation with those non-cyclists about their behavior behind the wheel, but also do an examination of your own behaviors and behind the wheel, and have that hard talk with yourself. I mean, are you really a good driver? Like, a lot of cyclists tend to believe that they are, but can we improve? Everybody can be safer out there.
We can all,
Bernie, thanks for coming down today. I know it's kind of a schlep from Boulder down to the garage here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, and you won't remember any of this because we're high on polyurethane fumes at this point anyway.
I'm gonna go home and pass out.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I'm glad you did this before you passed out.
Me too.
And for those of you listening, if you have questions for me, please do reach out at Brown Tie Dan. You can also get me at Slow Guy on the Fast Ride on the Instagrams. Bernie, where can they find you on social if they have questions for you?
At Bernie Tweets on Instagram or Twitter, but primarily Instagram these days.
Yeah. And of course, give us a subscribe down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. And if you didn't like this video, give me a thumbs up anyway. Go to slowguyonthefastride.com and sign up for my newsletter so you do not miss any of our awesome videos, the podcast that has just recently launched, and all the other cool content I'm doing here in the garage. Bernie, thanks for coming down.
It's my pleasure.
Good
Nice
to see
having me.
you.
You too.
You guys, see you next time.